Today is a fine day for some bird watching. It's also a fine day to talk about some of the decisions that could have been made for you without your knowledge that could affect your review experience. And today we're talking about two people who actually perform the review, either project managers who run maybe searches, review managers or reviewers, and not necessarily tech people who could actually be making some of those decisions for you. Now, most of these things relate to searchability of documents. They affect how you're going to run search term reports, or specifically what results search term reports are going to return, how you're going to do your privilege screening, and that will affect metadata fields that are available to you for searching. So let's talk about those things that will affect you. And the first thing that will affect your searching experience is what kind of text extraction engine was selected during processing. In addition to what other options for text extraction were selected during processing. So one example of it would be Excel headers. Often you get options how to deal with headers inside Excel files, so they could be extracted, they could be ignored, and based on that you will get different text, and that will affect whether your search terms hit on a document or not. Now, text extraction options aren't usually a big deal, and they're very similar to one another, but it is a variable, so I did want to mention it in this video. If you often receive outside productions and they contain a lot of metadata fields, well, field mappings is something that someone else has to deal with, probably a tech person, right? So they could receive a DAT file that contains maybe 50 different fields, and they have to choose how to map those fields to your existing environment. And what you get a lot of times is fields that are the same, but they contain slightly different information. So for example, you could have original path, source path, file path, native path, right? You could have different variations of the same thing, and things may look a little different, but you know, something will just have a path with a file name, some will have path without file name, and someone has to make a decision which fields to map to what existing fields. Should they make new fields? Should they skip the field completely? And this will affect your searching when you're doing field-based searches, of course. So if you expect the file path to be in a certain field, well, it may not be there, or it might be in a different field. And what I noticed with a lot of these complicated DAT files, even if you give a same DAT file to two different texts, they could make different decisions as to how to map the fields. And that will definitely affect your searchability if you're using metadata fields to find your documents. So one thing I do recommend is knowing what the field mapping was, how the data was loaded into your review environment, so you know what fields you received and where those fields went to in your database. But wait, we're not done with outside productions just yet. Sometimes we get outside productions as PDFs, and there are lots of flavors of that. You can get one big PDF with like thousands of pages and no document breaks. You can get PDFs and natives and no text. You can get PDFs and natives with text. So, and you can get different combinations of those. So somebody has to decide how to handle those PDFs. Sometimes they could have extracted text, sometimes they not. So they may need to be OCR'd. If you have native files, do you load native files and then TIFF and OCR them? Or do you run those native files through processing engine? So all those combinations of steps will result in completely different types of searchable text that you're going to get. So someone has to make that decision, and you're probably not even aware of that. And finally, let's talk about processing errors, my favorite topic. All right, so when we're doing processing, techs have to decide how to deal with errors. Of course, there are errors, there are always errors. And I've seen two extremes of it, well, and everything in between. So some of the extremes, What I do personally, how I work with my team, is I make sure that every error is logged, checked, and documented in a way that it can go in the report and be passed on to project manager, client, whoever. So everything's accounted for. The other extreme of this I've seen, people say like, look, I'm just an operator. I point to a folder on the server, I click import, whatever loads, loads, I'm done. This, of course, is a terrible attitude towards processing errors. And I thought that attitude like that is an exception. But I've seen a number of relativity cases that I've restored from other vendors where I've seen things that I couldn't believe my eyes I'm seeing. I've seen documents stuck in the processing stage and not published into the review environment just because of a field mismatch, right? Because the title field was too short in the relativity workspace, so documents weren't published. All you had to do is change the field size and the documents will go in, but they weren't because no one bothered to investigate problems at even the basic level. And because of this, knowing what your company's policy is or what your tech department's procedure is on handling processing errors is so important. You need to know where things handled, not handled, if there were PST problems, were they reported on, if there were any message extraction errors from a PST, are you missing documents you need to request, or something else. So we can talk about processing errors for a long time, but point is, you need to know what those rules are, how they're being handled, where the exception reports are, because those things will definitely affect your search results and what you are seeing in your review environment. So if you're on a review site, what else should you know about your tech team or about other processes that are happening inside your company that affects you? Let me know in the comment section below. Don't forget to follow on LinkedIn, subscribe on YouTube. I'll see you in the next video.